Thank you, Mr. Mishra. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Parthasarthi, my senior colleague, has spoken on of one side of the coin, that is energy security. I'll speak on the other side of the coin, and that is the security of energy infrastructure. You see, the Western world, unlike us, is paranoid about threats to its energy supplies and the security of its critical energy infrastructure. The USA in particular, I can tell you, feels that its dependence on energy imports, or perhaps things will change in due course, is one of the albatrosses of its broader national security vulnerability. That is the extent to which they have gone, and people like President Bush and several secretaries of state have articulated this kind of feeling that they have about energy. Not only that, they go beyond that and say that the potential threats to secured energy supplies can unsettle an entire way of life that they have in America. And that goes, or that far transcends the kind of concerns that we have, the immediate concerns about the impact on economy. I can't go into the reasons why they look at it this way, but very briefly, this is the kind of concerns that they have. And what I'm going to talk about is the fact that that energy security, that is the geopolitics and the economics of energy supplies, are very inextricably linked with the security of energy infrastructure. You cannot have assured, uninterrupted, price-stable supplies unless the critical infrastructure necessary for downstream and upstream operations is relatively secure. And what kind of security is this that we are talking about? Against disruptions, which cause volatile changes in prices. So these disruptions can come through violent physical attacks. They can come through cyber attacks, and they could come through natural disasters as well. But here we'd be looking more at the former two. Then there is a particular concern in the West, because segregated as the US is by two oceans, and we don't have the liberty in our geopolitical environment of that kind of buffer around us, they are extremely scared of the insider threat. As late as, or just a couple of months back, the Homeland Security Department issued an alert, a very serious alert to all the energy establishment, saying that insiders, radicalized insiders, are preparing to attack a generating plant. It could be even a nuclear plant, and that this insider threat is to be taken extremely seriously, because they now feel that, segregated as they are, I said, with this kind of a buffer, the kind of damage that could be done through a 9/11 attack can only now be done by an insider, because Al-Qaeda's ability to attack across the oceans is highly limited, so it has to be radicalized people within. So this is the insider threat that they're looking at. So therefore, what has happened is that developed countries have, since the last decade or two, developed a very structured approach to critical infrastructure protection. The developing countries, including us, and I would put ourselves in that category, are much more ad hoc in their responses, much more disaggregated, much more knee-jerk to attacks, and they move from attack to attack. Now just look at the serious shortcomings and confusion in this kind of ad hocism, which was reflected in the recent Bodh Gaya attacks on an iconic structure. Incidentally, I'll just tell you that the Americans define, and so does the European Union, as critical infrastructure those physical and virtual systems so vital that their destruction or serious impairment would jeopardize national security, economy, public health. They almost cover the well-being of the nation itself. And they have added destruction of iconic assets as well, and attacks on historical assets, which undermine national pride, prestige, and the confidence of the people. Now, we have had 2 attacks, or 3 attacks of this sort. One on the Red Fort, the other on the legislature in Srinagar. We have had an attack on Parliament. Doesn't seem to move us very much. So this is the kind of thing. Now, if you look at the Bodh Gaya attacks, you can see what kind of a knee-jerk response we have, and not a policy, a structured response to the protection of critical infrastructure. Now, this attack occurred despite clear and actionable intelligence being available well in time. The rudimentary security systems which were installed were unmanned and did not function. The state government has not assumed responsibility for it. The center has, in a sense, washed its hands off. The Home Minister, as you saw, was a little adrift. He probably was not too sort of familiar with this whole concept of critical infrastructure protection. The answer was that the already stretched out CISF should be deployed. And the ingenuity was found in getting around the CISF Act to be able to post it to an iconic site. Now, is this the kind of thing that we are looking at? I mean, it's somewhat ridiculous. In fact, we have not defined what is critical infrastructure at all in our country. At least there is no public or government definition of it. So there are serious shortcomings in our approach. Now, what I want to argue is that there is a case for a structured approach. And why so? We just have to see the ecology of attacks since 9/11. From New York, Washington, to Madrid, to London, Mumbai, to Moscow. I can't name all the attacks that have taken place, largely sort of inspired by the Al-Qaeda. And you see that it is critical infrastructure which is being attacked. So it's not this that attack on critical infrastructure is new, but the whole methodology has changed. Earlier on, it was tactical in pursuit of a larger strategic goal. Over the past decade, it has become a form of economic warfare. And this is largely attributable to the Al-Qaeda philosophy and its evolution from 1996, when it was declared as the wealth of the Ummah not to be touched by Osama bin Laden, to 2002, when the Limburg, the supertanker Limburg was attacked off the coast of Aden, and 2004, when Osama bin Laden declared open season on ONG, that is oil and natural gas infrastructure as well. So this is attributable to the Al-Qaeda and its cohorts, many of whom exist in our own neighborhood. And a couple of examples would highlight the problem that we have in terms of the attacks on ONG infrastructure, or oil and natural gas infrastructure. It's been going on for almost 3 decades. In Colombia, the FARC, that is the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, and the ELN have been targeting one important pipeline which carries around 20% of the oil of Colombia, which was at one time the 16th largest supplier to the global market. It's called the Cano Liman Covanas pipeline. There have been hundreds of attacks on it. And in 2001, there were 170 attacks. 170 attacks. This pipeline, which carries around 100,000 barrels of oil per day, was reduced to almost nothing. It was 80% of its capacity was lost. And the damages were in the region of $500 million during that month. So I can go on giving you examples ad nauseum from Algeria, from Nigeria, from the delta areas in the Nigeria, in our own neighborhood, the Sui gas fields in Baluchistan, in neighboring Pakistan, of course in India, the Ulfa, and so on and so forth. So energy infrastructure has been under attack, and there have been almost 300 attacks per annum, the highest against any form of infrastructure in the world. Terrorist attacks in the range of 300 attacks per annum over the last decade or two. And so also piracy. Piracy has assumed huge proportions. There are almost 350 incidents of piracy every year. Once again, over the last 1.5 decades, over the seas surrounding Somalia, the Gulf of Aden, the Gulf of Oman, the Arabian Sea, down to the Malacca Strait. So, and they're paying huge prices for it. They're paying huge prices for it. In 2010, an energy tanker, a super tanker, the Samo Dream, a Korean tanker was captured by Somali pirates, and they extracted the maximum hostage or hijack tariff, if you would like to call it that, at $10 million. That is amongst the highest that has ever been extracted. In 1999, you had an incident where another tanker called the Chamon was hijacked off the Malacca Straits in a very narrow area of Singapore. And the crew were tied up, and it sailed. It sailed without anyone at the helm for over 1 hour. This was weaponized transport waiting to attack a port, a choke point like Malacca itself, which carries nearly 12 million barrels of oil per day. That is what passes through Malacca, major part of the Chinese supply and so on and so forth for Southeast Asian countries. So this is the kind of thing, these are the doomsday scenario which exists. Now, as far as electricity infrastructure is concerned, it's not seen as that much of a strategic target so far by the terrorists. But that's not to say that there have not been attacks. There have been attacks, but unfortunately there are no databases available exclusively on terrorist attacks on electricity infrastructure. But there has been a lot, and the US Academy of Sciences carried out a study which said that the most threatened are the attacks so far, I might tell you, the maximum have taken place on transmission lines, some on substations, and some on generator units, but it's essentially transmission lines. But what US experts fear, the scientific experts fear, is that the most vulnerable and that which can cause huge outages of electricity ranging from few days to a month to years are high voltage towers. Those between 150 kilowatts up to 750 kilowatts. And they say that a chain of attacks on 4 or 5 or 6 towers, as was planned by the IRA in 1997, I think, in London, could have put a whole part of the UK, the southeastern part of UK, in darkness for a long period of time. Now, this is the kind of outages that they fear, but I must say that there have been no such attacks thus far. The whole issue of transformers, high voltage transformers, is a very complicated issue. How do you address this problem? Do you simply create a security grid around it? Do you have spares? Do you manufacture it locally because USA outsources it? How do you carry it? The rail cars which need to be available for carrying, say, a 750 kilowatt transformer of 450 tons are just not available. And the manufacturing period is 6 to 12 months. So what do you do? So all this requires great thought. What I'm trying to say is that everything cannot be protected, need not be protected, and that which is protected need not be protected. All that is protected need not be protected in the same manner. So you have degrees of protection, methodologies of protection. It could be a mixture of protection, strengthening of safety, creation of resilience, creation of redundancy, measures to enable recovery. You have to make a threat risk analysis. So this has become a very professional kind of an exercise. The USA and the EU have done it. They have gone through 2 presidential orders, a couple of executive orders, a national security strategy, and they have framed what they call a national infrastructure protection policy, which essentially demands a couple of things. One, responsibility must be centralized in a department. There must be effective partnerships across all stakeholders, particularly those in the private sector, because 90% of the CISs in developed countries belong in the private sector. There should be effective partnerships with them. There should be an exchange of information. There should be a comprehensive national asset database. I don't think we have that concept at all. And they have constructed it over the last 15, 20 years. It's taken them 15, 20 years. It ran into hundreds of thousands. The databases that came from the states, it had to be all rationalized. And cyber security has to be very keenly addressed. These are some of the points I wanted to make with you all. Thank you very much.